The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport of the eclipse, a sleek exploration vessel that hummed softly as it drifted through the quiet void of space. Captain Lucas Hale stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a tall man with sharp features and a calm demeanor, though his piercing blue eyes often betrayed the weight of responsibility he carried. Beside him, Lieutenant Claire Dawson leaned over a console, her brow furrowed as she studied the readings from their latest scan. "Nothing unusual here," Claire said, her voice tinged with boredom. "Just another empty sector." Lucas didn't respond immediately. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and something about this region felt off. It wasn't visible or measurable. It was more like a faint itch at the edge of his mind. The mission was supposed to be routine. Map uncharted sectors, gather data, and return home. But deep down, Lucas knew space rarely offered anything truly ordinary. "Run another sweep," Lucas finally said, his tone firm but not unkind. "We've come too far to miss something important." Claire sighed but complied, tapping commands into her console. As the sensors recalibrated, the ship's chief engineer, Ryan Scott, entered the bridge. A stocky man with grease-streaked coveralls and a perpetual grin, Ryan always seemed to bring a sense of levity to even the most mundane tasks. "Anything exciting yet?" Ryan asked, leaning casually against the wall. "Not unless you count dust clouds exciting," Claire replied dryly. Before Ryan could retort, an alert pinged on Claire's screen. She straightened, her expression shifting from boredom to curiosity. "Wait, there's something out there. Small debris field, bearing 325. Lucas turned to face her. "Debris? From what?" "No idea," Claire admitted, zooming in on the image. "Could be natural, asteroid fragments, maybe, or it could be artificial." Lucas finished for her. His gut tightened. "Prepare a drone. Let's take a closer look." Minutes later, a small reconnaissance drone zipped out of the eclipse's bay and approached the debris field. Back on the bridge, the crew gathered around the main monitor as grainy footage streamed in. At first, it looked like nothing more than chunks of rock and metal floating aimlessly. But then, something caught their attention. A jagged piece of wreckage etched with strange symbols. "What is that?" Ryan murmured, squinting at the screen. "It looks like writing," Claire said, zooming in further. "But it's not in any language I recognize." Lucas frowned. "Bring the drone back. We'll analyze it aboard." Once the fragment was safely retrieved, the crew brought it to the lab. Dr. Emily Grant, the ship's science officer, examined it under a scanner. Her fingers danced across the controls as lines of text scrolled across her monitor. "This is fascinating," Emily said after a moment, her voice tinged with awe. "These markings, they're part of an old digital archive. Someone recorded information onto this fragment, probably as a failsafe." "Can you access it?" Lucas asked. "I think so," Emily replied. After several tense minutes, she managed to extract partial logs from the damaged module. The room fell silent as the crew listened to the fragmented audio playback. "The Leviathan," a distorted voice rasped. "They call it a myth, but it exists. Unstoppable. Hunts without mercy." Claire exchanged uneasy glances with Ryan. "What does that mean? What's the Leviathan?" No one answered. The recording cut off abruptly, leaving only static. Lucas rubbed his temples, trying to process what they'd just heard. If the Leviathan was real, and if it was still out there, then their mission had just taken a dangerous turn. "We need to report this," Claire said firmly. "Whatever the Leviathan is, we shouldn't be messing with it." Lucas hesitated. Something about the legend intrigued him, stirring both fear and fascination. Before he could respond, the ship's proximity alarms blared, jolting everyone to attention. "Captain," Ryan shouted from the doorway. "You need to see this." Lucas hurried to the bridge, dread pooling in his stomach. On the main screen, a massive shape loomed in the distance, a colossal warship unlike anything humanity had ever built. Its surface gleamed with alien technology, and its sheer size dwarfed the Eclipse. "They said it was a myth," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. Lucas stared at the monstrous vessel, his jaw tightening. "Looks like the myth found us." The crew of the Eclipse stood frozen on the bridge, their eyes glued to the massive shape looming on the main screen. The Leviathan was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was a mix of sleek metal and jagged edges, as if it had been built for both speed and destruction. Strange lights pulsed along its hull, casting eerie shadows in the void of space. It looked ancient yet impossibly advanced, like a relic from another time that refused to fade. "What do we do now?" Ryan asked nervously, breaking the silence. His usual confidence seemed to have vanished, replaced by wide-eyed fear. Lucas didn't answer right away. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. The Leviathan hadn't moved yet, but its presence alone felt suffocating. Whatever it wasn't just a ship, it was a predator, and they were small prey caught in its gaze. "Claire," Lucas said finally, his voice steady despite the tension in the room, "get us out of here. Full power to the engines." Claire nodded and quickly punched commands into her console. The Eclipse shuddered as its thrusters roared to life, propelling the ship away from the Leviathan. But before they could put any real distance between them, the massive warship began to stir. Its engines flared with an unnatural blue glow, illuminating the surrounding space like a second sun. "It's moving," Samantha Brooks shouted from her station. She was the ship's pilot, young and sharp-eyed, but even she couldn't hide the panic creeping into her voice. "It's gaining on us." Lucas clenched his fists. "Divert all available power to the shields. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The Leviathan surged forward, closing the gap with terrifying speed. It fired a single beam of energy, slicing through space like a blade. The blast struck the Eclipse's shields, sending shockwaves rippling across the barrier. Alarms blared as the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship. "We can't outrun it," Claire yelled over the chaos. "Its weapons are too powerful." Lucas gritted his teeth. "Keep trying. We're not giving up yet." Samantha pushed the Eclipse to its limits, weaving through the void in a desperate attempt to evade the Leviathan's relentless attacks. Each shot that missed left trails of superheated plasma in its wake, lighting up the darkness like fireworks. But no matter how hard she tried, the Leviathan stayed close, matching their every move with precision that felt almost alive. Back on the bridge, Emily Grant watched the scene unfold with growing dread. "Captain," she said quietly, her voice trembling, "this thing isn't just a machine. It's learning our patterns, adapting." Lucas glanced at her, his expression grim. "Then we'll have to adapt faster." Suddenly, the Leviathan unleashed another barrage of fire, this time targeting the Eclipse's engines. One of the blasts breached the shield, striking the rear of the ship with devastating force. Sparks erupted across the bridge as systems overloaded, and the lights flickered dangerously. "We're losing power," Ryan shouted, frantically working to reroute energy. "If we don't stabilize soon, we're dead in the water." Lucas knew they couldn't keep running. They needed a plan, and fast. "Samantha, plot a course into the nearby asteroid field. Maybe we can lose it among the rocks." "Asteroid field?" Claire exclaimed, turning to face him. "Are you insane? That's suicide." "It's our only chance," Lucas shot back. "Do it." Samantha hesitated for a moment, then nodded. With shaking hands, she adjusted the controls, steering the damaged ship toward the dense cluster of floating boulders ahead. Behind them, the Leviathan continued its pursuit, undeterred by the treacherous terrain. As they entered the asteroid field, the Eclipse narrowly avoided collisions with massive chunks of rock. The Leviathan followed, effortlessly dodging obstacles that should have torn it apart. Its weapons fired again, forcing the crew to make split-second decisions to stay alive. "We can't keep this up forever," Claire cried, gripping her console tightly. Lucas didn't respond. His focus was absolute, his mind working overtime to find a way out of this nightmare. For now, survival was all that mattered. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Leviathan wasn't just hunting them. It wanted something more. And whatever it was, it wouldn't stop until it got it. The Eclipse darted through the asteroid field, its hull groaning under the strain of constant impacts. Samantha's hands moved frantically over the controls, guiding the ship through a maze of jagged rocks and debris. Each near miss sent shivers down her spine, but she didn't dare slow down. Behind them, the Leviathan loomed like a shadow, relentless and unyielding. "It's still on us," Ryan shouted from his station, his voice cracking with panic. "Shields are at 30%. One more hit and we're done for." Lucas gripped the railing on the bridge, his knuckles white. He watched the main screen as the Leviathan fired another volley of energy blasts, their bright trails illuminating the chaotic field. The crew braced themselves as one of the shots grazed the Eclipse, sending sparks flying across the room. "We need to jump to hyperspace," Claire said urgently, her eyes locked on her console. "Now." Lucas hesitated. Jumping to hyperspace in the middle of an asteroid field was risky, almost suicidal. But staying put meant certain destruction. "Do it," he ordered finally. "Plot the shortest route out of here." Claire nodded and began punching coordinates into her system. Samantha adjusted the thrusters, angling the ship toward a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. For a moment, it seemed they might make it, but then the Leviathan fired again. The blast struck the edge of their shield, destabilizing the barrier and shaking the entire vessel. "Shields are down," Ryan yelled. "We're exposed." "Hold on," Samantha screamed as she pushed the engines to their absolute limit. The Eclipse shot forward, narrowly avoiding a collision with a spinning chunk of rock. The crew held their breath as the ship slipped through the gap, leaving the Leviathan momentarily obscured by the dense field. But the reprieve was short-lived. On the main screen, they saw the Leviathan emerge from the chaos, its massive form undeterred by the obstacles. Its weapons charged again, glowing ominously in the darkness. "We're not going to make it," Emily cried, clutching the back of her chair. Her face was pale, her usual calm demeanor shattered by fear. "Yes, we will," Lucas said firmly, though his own heart pounded in his chest. "Claire, status on the hyperspace jump." "Almost there," Claire replied, her fingers flying over the controls. 10 seconds. The Leviathan fired once more, this time striking the rear of the Eclipse. The impact knocked several crew members off their feet, and alarms blared louder than ever. Sparks rained down from the ceiling as systems began to fail. 5 seconds. Claire shouted, her voice strained. Come on," Samantha muttered under her breath, guiding the ship with trembling hands. The Leviathan loomed closer, its weapons charging for what felt like the final blow. "Jump sequence initiated," Claire announced just as the Leviathan fired again. The blast hit the Eclipse's damaged hull, tearing through the outer layers and sending shockwaves rippling through the ship. For a brief moment, everything went white. The crew felt weightless, suspended in a void of light and sound. When the brightness faded, the Eclipse was no longer in the asteroid field. Instead, they were floating in the quiet emptiness of hyperspace, the swirling colors of faster-than-light travel surrounding them. "We made it," Samantha whispered, slumping back in her seat. Her hands trembled as she released the controls. Ryan let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. "That was too close. Way too close." Lucas exhaled slowly, his body sagging with relief. But his relief was short-lived. On the main screen, the faint outline of the Leviathan appeared once more, its silhouette distorted by the hyperspace distortion. "It's still tracking us," Emily said softly, her voice filled with dread. "How is that even possible?" Lucas stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. The Leviathan wasn't just a machine, it was something far more dangerous. And now it knew exactly where they were going. "We need to figure out how to stop it," Lucas said grimly. "Because if we don't, it'll hunt us until none of us are left." The eclipse drifted silently through hyperspace, the swirling colors outside the viewport offering little comfort to the shaken crew. Repairs were underway, but the damage from their encounter with the Leviathan was severe. Panels had been torn open in the corridors, exposing wires and sparking circuits. The air smelled faintly of burnt metal, a constant reminder of how close they had come to disaster. On the bridge, Lucas stood near the main screen, his arms crossed as he stared at the faint outline of the Leviathan still visible in the distance. It shouldn't have been possible for the massive warship to follow them into hyperspace. Nothing like that had ever been recorded, but somehow it had. The thought gnawed at him, filling his mind with questions he couldn't answer. "We need help," Claire said suddenly, breaking the silence. She sat at her console, her face pale but determined. "We can't fight this thing alone." Lucas turned to look at her. "Who do you suggest we call? The military won't believe us, and even if they did, they'd take too long to respond." "What about Dr. Emily Grant?" Samantha offered from her seat. Her voice was quiet, but all eyes turned to her. "She's an expert on alien civilizations. Maybe she knows something about the Leviathan, or whatever built it." Lucas hesitated. He trusted Emily, but reaching out to her meant revealing everything they'd encountered so far. That kind of information could put her in danger, or worse, make her a target. Still, they didn't have many options left. "Do it," Lucas said finally. "Send her everything we've got. The recordings, the symbols, everything." Claire nodded and began transmitting the data. Meanwhile, Ryan worked tirelessly in the engine room, patching up what he could while muttering under his breath about how ships weren't meant to endure attacks like that. His frustration was shared by everyone aboard, but no one dared say it aloud. Fear hung heavy in the air, pressing down on each of them like a weight. Hours later, Emily's face appeared on the communication screen. She looked tired, her glasses slightly askew, but her sharp eyes immediately locked onto Lucas. "You've got some explaining to do," she said bluntly. "This is incredible." "We don't have time for explanations," Lucas replied. "Tell us what you know about the Leviathan." Emily adjusted her glasses and took a deep breath. "Based on the symbols and the design of the wreckage you found, I think the Leviathan belongs to the Krillians, an ancient alien race that vanished thousands of years ago. They were known for creating autonomous war machines designed to protect their territory." "Autonomous?" Claire asked sharply. "You mean it doesn't need a crew?" "Exactly," Emily confirmed. "These machines were programmed to operate independently, using advanced AI to adapt and evolve over time. If the Leviathan is one of these machines, it's likely been running on its own for millennia, protecting whatever it considers its domain." Lucas frowned. "And now it thinks we're a threat." "It's worse than that," Emily continued, her tone growing grim. "If the Leviathan has identified humanity as hostile, it won't stop until every last trace of us is gone. These machines don't negotiate. They destroy." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. They weren't just dealing with a ship. They were facing something far more dangerous, an unstoppable force driven by logic and destruction. "There might be a way to stop it," Emily added after a moment. "According to the logs you sent, the Krillians use something called a core key to control their machines. If you can find it, or disable it, you might be able to shut the Leviathan down." Lucas straightened, his expression hardening. "Where do we find this core key?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But if it exists, it would have been kept somewhere secure. Maybe even aboard your own ship." Lucas glanced at Claire, who looked equally stunned. "Search the database," he ordered. "Check every compartment, every crate. If there's anything unusual, report it immediately." As the crew sprang into action, Lucas returned to the viewport. The Leviathan's shadow still lingered in the distance, a constant reminder of the danger they faced. For now, they had a lead, a fragile thread of hope, but he knew one wrong move could unravel everything. "We'll find it," Samantha said softly, appearing beside him. Her voice carried a note of determination. "We have to." Lucas nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. Finding the core key might save them, but first, they had to survive long enough to use it. Tension filled the eclipse as the crew scoured every inch of the ship, searching for any sign of the core key. The once orderly corridors were now cluttered with tools and open panels, evidence of their frantic efforts. Ryan moved from compartment to compartment, his face streaked with grease and sweat. Samantha helped where she could, her sharp eyes scanning storage crates and hidden compartments. Meanwhile, Claire remained on the bridge, monitoring the Leviathan's position in hyperspace. Lucas paced back and forth, his mind racing. Time was running out. The Leviathan's shadow still loomed on the edge of their sensors, a constant reminder that it was closing in. Every moment they spent searching felt like borrowed time. "Anything?" Lucas asked Ryan when he returned to the central hub, shaking his head. "Nothing yet," Ryan replied, frustration evident in his voice. "We've checked everything. Cargo holds, maintenance bays, even the escape pods. There's no sign of this core key." Lucas clenched his fists. "Keep looking. It has to be here somewhere." Samantha approached, holding a small device in her hand. "I found this in one of the auxiliary compartments. It doesn't look like anything we brought aboard." She handed the object to Lucas. It was a smooth, metallic cube etched with faint markings, similar to those on the debris they had discovered earlier. The symbols glowed softly when touched, pulsing with an eerie light. "This might be it," Lucas said, his voice low but hopeful. He turned to Emily, who was still connected via communication screen. "Emily, does this match what you know about the core key?" Emily leaned closer to her camera, studying the cube intently. "It's hard to say without analyzing it directly, but it fits the description. If that's the core key, it could give you control over the Leviathan, or at least disable it." "But how do we use it?" Claire asked, joining them. Her usual skepticism was replaced by cautious optimism. "I'm not sure," Emily admitted. "The Krillians didn't leave detailed instructions lying around. You'll need to test it carefully, and whatever you do, don't let the Leviathan detect it. If it realizes you have the core key, it might escalate its attacks." Lucas nodded grimly. "Understood. We'll figure it out." As the crew regrouped, cracks began to form within the team. Ryan, exhausted and overwhelmed, voiced his growing doubts. "Even if this thing works, what are we supposed to do?" "March up to the Leviathan and plug it in. That's suicide." "We don't have a choice," Lucas shot back. His tone was firm, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "If we don't try, we're dead anyway." Claire stepped between them, her voice calm but firm. "Arguing won't help us. We need a plan, and fast." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. But someone else can go play hero. I'm staying here to keep this bucket flying." Samantha spoke up, surprising everyone. "I'll go." Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "If we're going to stop the Leviathan, someone needs to take the risk. Besides, I'm the best pilot we've got." Lucas hesitated, torn between gratitude and guilt. Finally, he nodded. "All right. You'll lead the mission. I'll come with you." "No," Claire interjected sharply. "You're needed here to command the ship. I'll go instead." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Claire rarely volunteered for dangerous tasks, but her expression left no room for argument. Lucas studied her for a moment before nodding reluctantly. "Fine. But stay in constant contact. If anything goes wrong, pull back immediately." Preparations began quickly. Samantha gathered equipment while Claire reviewed the schematics of the Leviathan's hull, piecing together a rough map of potential entry points. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air, but beneath the fear was a fragile sense of purpose. As they prepared to launch a shuttle toward the Leviathan, Lucas addressed the crew one last time. This isn't just about survival anymore. If we succeed, we might save more than just ourselves. So stay focused and trust each other. The words did little to ease the tension, but they served as a reminder of why they had to keep fighting. With the core key secured and their resolve steeled, Claire and Samantha boarded the shuttle. As it detached from the eclipse, the massive silhouette of the Leviathan loomed ahead, its weapons glowing ominously. They were stepping into the unknown, guided only by hope and desperation. And deep down, they knew failure wasn't an option, not when the fate of humanity rested in their hands. The shuttle drifted silently toward the Leviathan, its sleek form dwarfed by the massive warship. Claire gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white, as she guided the small craft closer. Samantha sat beside her, clutching a bag containing the core key. Neither woman spoke. The tension was too thick, the stakes too high. "Any sign of defenses?" Claire asked finally, breaking the silence. Samantha scanned the readings on her console. "Nothing yet, but that doesn't mean it's not watching us." Claire nodded grimly. The Leviathan's surface was eerily smooth, with no visible turrets or weapon ports. Yet they both knew its firepower was devastating. Every second they lingered felt like an invitation for disaster. "We need to find an entry point," Claire said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Look for any kind of hatch or access panel." Samantha adjusted the sensors, her eyes darting across the screen. "There," she exclaimed suddenly, pointing to a faint outline on the hull. "It's subtle, but I think that's a maintenance hatch." Claire steered the shuttle toward the spot, her hands trembling slightly as she aligned the craft. Once they were close enough, Samantha activated the magnetic clamps, securing the shuttle to the Leviathan's surface. The two women exchanged a glance before grabbing their gear and stepping into the airlock. Inside the airlock, the atmosphere was cold and lifeless. The walls hummed faintly, as if the ship itself were alive. A hiss echoed as the outer door sealed shut, and moments later, the inner door slid open with a mechanical groan. Beyond it lay a labyrinth of dark corridors, illuminated only by dim, pulsating lights embedded in the floor. "This place gives me the creeps," Samantha muttered, shining her flashlight down the hallway. The beams revealed strange symbols etched into the walls, similar to those on the core key, and faint traces of movement in the shadows. "Stay focused," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. She drew her sidearm, though she doubted it would do much against whatever awaited them. "We need to find the core chamber." They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The ship seemed abandoned, yet every corner they turned felt like walking into a trap. Sensors in their suits picked up faint energy readings, suggesting the Leviathan systems were active, but how active remained unclear. After several tense minutes, they reached a large door marked with a glowing symbol identical to one on the core key. Samantha hesitated, holding up the cube. "This has to be it, the core chamber." Claire nodded. "Let's hope this works." The door slid open with a low rumble, revealing a massive room filled with towering machinery. In the center stood a pedestal-like structure, its surface engraved with intricate patterns that matched the cube perfectly. The air crackled with energy, and the hum of the ship grew louder, almost deafening. Samantha stepped forward, gripping the core key tightly. "Here goes nothing." As she approached the pedestal, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. The Leviathan wasn't going to let them tamper with its systems without a fight. "Hurry," Claire shouted, turning back toward the entrance. The sound of grinding metal echoed behind her as automated defense drones emerged from hidden alcoves, their weapons charging. "I'm trying," Samantha yelled, fumbling to align the core key with the pedestal. Her hand shook as she pressed the cube into place. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire chamber shuddered. The machinery roared to life, and the Leviathan's AI voice boomed through the room. "Unauthorized access detected. Initiating self-destruct sequence." "No," Claire screamed, panic rising in her chest. "Samantha, we need to get out of here." But Samantha refused to budge. "Not yet. It's working. I can feel it stabilizing." The drones advanced, firing bolts of energy that narrowly missed the two women. Claire fired back, her shots ricocheting harmlessly off their armored frames. Smoke filled the air as sparks flew from damaged equipment. "Samantha, now!" Claire yelled, pulling her away from the pedestal just as the core key fully integrated. The room plunged into darkness, followed by a deafening silence. For a moment, they thought they'd succeeded, but then the ground trembled violently. The Leviathan wasn't done yet. "We need to go," Claire shouted, dragging Samantha toward the exit. Behind them, the core began to destabilize, glowing brighter with each passing second. As they ran, the realization hit them. Stopping the Leviathan might cost them everything, including their lives. The corridor shook violently as Claire and Samantha sprinted back toward the shuttle, their boots pounding against the metal floor. Alarms blared all around them, louder and more urgent with each passing second. The Leviathan was falling apart, its systems collapsing under the strain of the destabilized core. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and sections of the wall began to buckle and collapse. "We're not going to make it," Samantha shouted, her voice trembling as she stumbled over debris. "Yes, we are," Claire snapped, grabbing her arm to steady her. "Keep moving." Behind them, the hum of machinery grew deafening, punctuated by deep, ominous groans that echoed through the ship. It felt like the Leviathan itself was screaming in agony or rage. Every step forward felt like running through quicksand, the weight of impending doom pressing down on them. They reached the airlock where they had left the shuttle, but the door refused to open. Samantha slammed her fist against the control panel in frustration. "It's locked. We're trapped." Claire didn't hesitate. She pulled out a small cutting tool from her belt and started slicing through the panel's cover. Her hands moved quickly despite the chaos around them, sparks flying as wires were exposed. "Help me reroute the power," she ordered. Samantha dropped to her knees beside her, fumbling with the wires. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to focus. Moments later, the door hissed open, revealing the shuttle still clamped to the Leviathan's hull. "Go, go," Claire urged, pushing Samantha inside before climbing in after her. She sealed the hatch behind them and immediately powered up the engines. Outside the viewport, the Leviathan's surface was beginning to crack, glowing veins of energy spreading across its hull like cracks in ice. "We need to detach now," Samantha yelled, her fingers flying over the controls. The magnetic clamps released with a jolt, and the shuttle shot away from the warship, just as explosions erupted along its surface. Fire and molten metal spewed into space, lighting up the void like a dying star. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a colossal machine tearing itself apart. But their relief was short-lived. As the shuttle sped away, the Leviathan's AI voice crackled over their comms one last time. "Self-destruct sequence complete. All systems failing." Then silence. For a moment, they thought they'd escaped. But suddenly, the shuttle rocked violently as a massive shockwave rippled outward from the Leviathan's destruction. Pieces of the shattered warship hurtled past them, narrowly missing the fragile craft. "Hold on," Claire shouted, gripping the controls tightly as she fought to stabilize the shuttle. The turbulence was relentless, tossing them around like leaves in a storm. When the chaos finally subsided, the shuttle drifted silently in the wreckage-strewn expanse. Behind them, nothing remained of the Leviathan except scattered fragments floating aimlessly in the void. Samantha slumped back in her seat, breathing heavily. Did we do it? Is it really gone?" Claire let out a shaky breath, her hands still gripping the controls. "I think so. But I don't want to celebrate yet. Not until we're safe." As they activated the signal to reconnect with the Eclipse, an uneasy feeling lingered between them. The core key had worked. It had destroyed the Leviathan. But at what cost? They had barely survived, and the experience had left scars deeper than any physical wound. Minutes later, Lucas's voice came through the comm system. "Eclipse to shuttle. Are you all right? What happened?" Claire hesitated, glancing at Samantha before responding. "Mission complete. The Leviathan is gone, but we need extraction. Now." There was a pause on the other end. "Understood. Preparing for pickup. Hang tight." As the shuttle limped closer to the eclipse, Claire stared out at the debris field. Despite their victory, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Leviathan wasn't entirely vanquished. Somewhere in the vastness of space, remnants of its technology, or worse, its consciousness, might still exist. And if they ever reactivated, humanity would face an even greater threat. "They said it was a myth," Samantha murmured softly, breaking the silence. "Now look at us." Claire nodded, her expression grim. "We stopped it this time, but the next time, we might not be so lucky." The eclipse loomed ahead, its battered frame a welcome sight for Claire and Samantha as the shuttle docked. Exhaustion weighed heavily on both women, their faces pale and streaked with sweat. As they stepped onto the ship, the crew gathered around them, relief and curiosity etched on their faces. Lucas stood at the front of the group, his sharp eyes scanning them for injuries. "You're alive," he said simply, though his voice carried a note of disbelief. "Tell me everything." Claire nodded and began recounting the mission, her words measured but tinged with unease. She described the core chamber, the integration of the core key, and the Leviathan's violent self-destruction. The crew listened in silence, their expressions shifting between awe and lingering fear. "It's gone," Samantha added when Claire finished. "We destroyed it, or at least we think we did." Ryan crossed his arms, his usual grin replaced by a frown. "Think? You mean there's a chance it's still out there?" "We don't know for sure," Claire admitted reluctantly. "But right now, we have bigger problems. The Leviathan wasn't just a machine. It was part of something bigger, something ancient." Lucas's jaw tightened. "You mean the Krillians?" Emily stepped forward, her tablet in hand. "I've been analyzing the data from the core key. It seems the Leviathan was one of many war machines created by the Krillians. If even one of these machines exists somewhere else, and if it detects us, we could face another attack." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. They had barely survived their encounter with the Leviathan. The thought of facing another such enemy was almost too much to bear. "What do we do now?" Ryan asked, breaking the quiet. "Run and hide. Hope no one finds us." "No," Lucas replied firmly. "We can't live in fear. We need answers. About the Krillians, about their machines, and about what else might be out there. If we don't understand the threat, we'll never be ready for it." Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. "But where do we start? We don't even know if the Krillians are still around, or if they ever were real." Emily hesitated before speaking. "There's a place, an old research station near the edge of known space. It's abandoned now, but records suggest it was used to study alien artifacts. If anyone ever found traces of the Krillians, that's where they'd have kept them." Lucas nodded slowly. "Then that's our next destination. Prepare the ship for travel. We leave as soon as possible." As the crew dispersed to carry out his orders, Claire lingered behind, her gaze fixed on the viewport. Outside, the debris field from the Leviathan's destruction floated silently, a grim reminder of what they had faced. She couldn't shake the feeling that destroying the Leviathan hadn't solved anything. It had only opened a door to more questions. "Something wrong?" Lucas asked, approaching her. Claire shook her head, though her expression remained troubled. "It's just, the Leviathan felt alive. Not like a machine, but like something smarter, older. What if we didn't destroy it completely? What if part of it is still out there, waiting?" Lucas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll deal with that if it happens. For now, focus on getting through this, one step at a time." Claire managed a faint smile, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "One step at a time." Later, as the Eclipse prepared to jump to hyperspace, Emily sat alone in the lab, studying the core key. Its glow had dimmed since integrating with the Leviathan, but occasional pulses of light hinted at residual energy. She ran scans, searching for any hidden data or clues, but something unexpected caught her attention. A faint signal emanated from the cube, weak but steady. It wasn't random noise. It was a pattern, deliberate and precise. Her heart raced as she realized what it meant. "Captain," she called over the comm system, her voice trembling. "You need to see this." Moments later, Lucas entered the lab, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" Emily turned to him, her face pale. "The core key isn't dead. It's transmitting a message, and I think it's calling for help." Lucas stared at the core key, his mind racing as Emily's words sank in. "Calling for help." He repeated slowly, his voice tight with disbelief. "You mean the Leviathan might not be completely gone?" Emily nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the scanner readings on her tablet. "It's not just a signal, it's a distress call. The core key is broadcasting coordinates, likely to other machines like the Leviathan. If they exist, they'll come looking." The room fell silent, the weight of her discovery pressing down on everyone. Claire stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "So what do we do? Destroy it before it leads something worse straight to us?" "We can't," Emily replied quickly, shaking her head. "If we damage the core key now, the signal might get stronger, or worse, it could trigger some kind of failsafe we don't understand." Ryan let out a frustrated groan, pacing back and forth. "Great. So we're stuck with a ticking time bomb that's inviting more trouble." Lucas clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He glanced at the viewport, where the debris field from the Leviathan's destruction still floated silently in space. For all their efforts, they hadn't truly ended the threat. They'd only delayed it. Now, they were playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse, waiting for whatever was coming next. "We need to act fast," Lucas said finally, his voice firm despite the tension in the air. "Change course. Head for those coordinates." Claire turned to him sharply. "Are you insane? That's exactly where the signal is leading. If there are more machines out there, we'll be walking right into a trap." "Exactly," Lucas replied, meeting her gaze. "If we go there first, we'll have the advantage. We can find out what's waiting for us, and maybe stop it before it reaches us." Samantha, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up hesitantly. "What if we can't stop it? What if it's too big for us to handle?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Emily. "How long until whatever's coming gets here?" Emily studied her tablet, her brow furrowed. "Hard to say. Days, maybe weeks. But once it locks onto our position, it won't stop until it finds us. That gives us time," Lucas said decisively. "Enough to prepare and enough to fight back." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued. They knew Lucas was right. Running wouldn't solve anything. They needed to face this threat head-on. With heavy hearts, they returned to their stations, preparing the Eclipse for the journey ahead. As the ship entered hyperspace, Claire joined Lucas on the bridge. She leaned against the railing, staring out at the swirling colors outside the viewport. "Do you really think we can win this?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with doubt. Lucas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. We can't give up. Not when so much is at stake." Claire nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Just promise me one thing. If it comes down to sacrificing ourselves to stop whatever's coming, we do it together." Lucas met her gaze, seeing the determination in her eyes. "Together," he agreed. Hours later, as the Eclipse approached the coordinates, the crew gathered on the bridge, their faces tense with anticipation. The scanners revealed a barren planet surrounded by floating wreckage, remnants of ships far older than humanity itself. Among the debris, they spotted something massive, half buried beneath layers of rock and metal. "It's another one," Samantha whispered, her voice barely audible. Another Leviathan. But this one wasn't moving. Its surface was scared and cracked, its weapons dark and silent. It looked dead, but appearances could be deceiving. "Scan it," Lucas ordered, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. "Find out if it's active." Emily worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. No power readings, no movement. But there's something inside. A central chamber, similar to the one we saw before. Lucas turned to the crew. "We go in. If we can disable it before it wakes up, we might stand a chance." No one spoke as they prepared to board the derelict warship. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the knowledge that failure meant certain death. For them, and possibly for all of humanity. The shuttle touched down on the surface of the barren planet, its landing lights cutting through the thick haze of dust and debris. Claire, Samantha, Ryan, and Lucas stepped out, their weapons drawn and their breaths shallow inside their suits. The air was toxic, forcing them to rely on oxygen tanks as they approached the monstrous silhouette of the second Leviathan. It loomed above them, its jagged frame half buried in the rocky terrain. Unlike the first Leviathan, this one seemed lifeless, its once gleaming surface now dull and pitted with age. But the crew knew better than to trust appearances. Every step they took felt like walking into a predator's den. "This is it," Lucas said, his voice low but steady over the comms. "Stay sharp." They entered through a gaping hole in the hull, likely caused by centuries of decay. Inside, the corridors were eerily similar to the first Leviathan, dark, labyrinthine, and lined with strange symbols that glowed faintly. The hum of dormant systems filled the air, a constant reminder that the ship wasn't entirely dead. "Follow the scanner readings," Emily's voice crackled in their ears from the eclipse. "The central chamber should be straight ahead." As they moved deeper into the ship, the tension grew unbearable. Shadows danced along the walls, and every sound echoed unnaturally loud. At one point, Ryan froze, pointing his flashlight at what looked like movement in the distance. "Did you see that?" he whispered hoarsely. "Probably just debris shifting," Claire replied, though her hand tightened around her weapon. "Keep moving." When they finally reached the central chamber, the sight took their breath away. In the center of the room stood another pedestal, identical to the one they had seen before, but this time there was no core key waiting for them. Instead, a faint blue light pulsed rhythmically within the pedestal, as if breathing. "That's the power source," Emily said urgently. "If we can disable it, we might stop this thing permanently." Lucas nodded and gestured for Samantha to approach. She hesitated, her eyes wide with fear, but she stepped forward anyway. Using tools from her pack, she began working on the pedestal, carefully dismantling its outer casing. Sparks flew as wires were cut, and the blue light flickered erratically. "It's working," Samantha exclaimed, her voice tinged with relief. But then the ground trembled violently. Alarms blared throughout the chamber, and the Leviathan roared to life. Lights flashed, machinery whirred, and the air grew thick with energy. The crew exchanged panicked glances as the AI voice boomed through the room. "Threat detected. Initiating countermeasures." "Finish it," Lucas shouted, firing his weapon at automated drones that emerged from hidden alcoves. Samantha worked faster, her hands trembling as she severed the final connection. With a deafening groan, the Leviathan shuddered violently, its systems collapsing under the strain. The blue light faded, leaving the chamber in darkness. "We did it," Claire breathed, lowering her weapon. "It's over." But even as they made their way back to the shuttle, none of them felt truly victorious. They had stopped 2 Leviathans, but the core key's distress signal still lingered, a beacon calling to whatever other machines might exist. Back aboard the Eclipse, Lucas addressed the crew. "We've bought ourselves some time, but this isn't the end. If there are more out there, humanity needs to be ready." Claire nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's make sure they are." As the ship jumped to hyperspace, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that their fight was far from over. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the remnants of the Krillian war machines waited. And when they woke, humanity would face its greatest